Okay, trying to wrap this up with a solution to the malfunctioning pulse width modulation circuit for this Titanium MIG170 welder. So as it turns out, the pulse width modulation circuit on this main board is malfunctioning. I showed that in some previous video. Before I go any further, this welder is unplugged and it's sat overnight unplugged, so the capacitors are dissipated and the lethal voltage hazard is no longer, so it's safe to work on here. So what I have here is an external pulse width modulation module that can be found on Amazon or AliExpress or wherever. It's a generic module that can control a much larger motor than what we're working with here. So the red and black wires are the DC input, which right now I have from a bench power supply. So that's almost 19 volts DC going to this module. There's also the module has a already pre-wired potentiometer that controls the RPM of the motor. And then the green and blue wires are the pulse width modulation output that should go directly to the motor. And as the motor is actually that we're working on is right here. So this is a DC motor. There's a gear head on the other side of the panel here that that operates, that feeds the wire from the spool through the gun. So that's what we're working on to get operating correctly. So you'll need to disconnect two cables from this daughter board up here to get this to work. So this is the connector that goes directly to the motor. There's a few switches in the circuit also, but that's not important at this point. So that cable is right here. And what I have is I have the output, one side of the output from pulse width modulation going to the essentially the common negative side of the connector. And then the other side of the pulse width modulation goes up here, which this cable, which was disconnected from here, this cable, this goes directly to the spool gun trigger. So when the trigger is pulled, these are connected, these two wires, and when it's released, it's floating. So what I have here is I'm just directing the output of the pulse width modulation into the trigger cable. It goes out to the trigger, and then the return line goes back to the motor. So I already have the power supply turned on. So if I pull the trigger, you'll hear the motor running. So there's no electronics anymore that we're interfacing with on this board or this board to control that feed motor. And let's see if I can get over here and you can see it operating. Sorry. So that's at the highest speed. Now independently I have two of these welders. The other welder works fine. I measured the RPM of that motor at the lowest potentiometer setting here and the highest, and it ran between, I believe, 12 RPM and 120. So with the voltage feeding that power, that pulse width modulation circuit module, that's at least 18 volts, preferably 24 volts is enough to run that motor in the same range band with the rotation of this potentiometer. So that's something that'll have to be independently verified, that you're in the range of about 12 to 120 RPM. So that'll be consistent with matching up with the voltage settings on this potentiometer to get your welding in the sweet spot. So the other thing I have done is on the back here is the on-off switch for the main power. And this is the back side of that on-off switch here. So the wires, the black, white, and green are from the cable that connects to the wall plug. The black and white go to the bottom of this paddle switch, and when it's asserted on, the black here makes connection to this, and the white on the bottom makes connection to this. So there's 220 VAC at this point. So what I did is I pulled the spade lug connectors off, cut them off, and also I teed in a small power cable and put new connectors on with that power cable wrapped around the main. So now I have, when this is plugged in, there'll be 220 here. What I don't have right now is a 220 VAC to 24 volt DC power supply. I have that in order. It's a module roughly this size. So these wires will go to the input of that, and then the output will power this. So the idea is when the power supply for the welder is turned on, it also energizes the 24 volt DC power supply and the pulse width modulation circuit. So it's running. There's no other intervention. You don't have to turn anything on. So as soon as you start pulling the trigger with the welder on, you should be good to go to weld. So I will follow up with one more video showing how I integrated these two modules inside of this box, cleaned up the wiring, and do some test welds. I believe this will be a reasonable solution to this problem. The downfall is the front panel potentiometer no longer works, nor does the digital display on the wire feed speed. So that has to be recognized in this fix. But other than that, I will mount this potentiometer somewhere convenient, and its range will roughly, from full to minimum, will roughly match the range of that now non-functioning potentiometer. So it'll take a little bit of fiddling to get the right feel for the settings, but that's how I weld with these machines anyway. Is I kind of have a sense of where I should start with the settings, and then I'll adjust it on the fly until my welds are beautiful and clean. So there you go. Thanks a lot. Bye.